It's always a daunting task to get to grips with the controls in a wrestling game, especially one that is completely new. Therefore, in this video, I'm going to walk you through the main controls in AEW Fight Forever, from basic actions such as strikes and grapples to more advanced maneuvers like springboards. So let's start with the basics. To move around, simply move the left analog stick in the direction that you want to go. To run, hold the left stick in the direction that you want to go and press circle. To exit the ring, move the left analog stick towards the ropes and press L2 to move onto the apron. From here, move the left stick towards the floor and press L2 again to drop down. To get back in the ring, hold the left analog stick towards the ropes and press L2 to climb onto the apron. Then press L2 again to climb through the ropes. If you're in a rush, you can also press circle to quickly slide into the ring. Strike attacks are split between two buttons. Pressing square will perform a high strike, such as a punch, while pressing triangle will perform a low strike, such as a kick. Alternate strikes can also be performed by holding the left stick in any direction while pressing one of the strike buttons. Strong strikes can be performed by holding the strike buttons, with alternate moves also available when holding the strike button and then moving the analog stick in any direction. Players can also string together a combination of strikes by repeatedly pressing the high or low strike button. To perform a grapple, press X to lock up with your opponent. From this position, players can press the grapple button again to perform a grapple move, with different moves also available when moving the left stick up, down, left or right. From the grapple position, players can also choose to perform a strike attack by pressing the high or low strike buttons, with alternate moves also available when moving the analog stick up, down, left or right. You can also perform a strong move by holding the grapple button during the initial lockup. From this position, as with the regular grapple, players can perform a strong move by pressing either the grapple button or the high or low strike buttons. Rear grapples work the same way as grappling your opponent from the front, with both strong and light grapples available when pressing or holding the grapple button. Players can quickly switch from a front grapple to a rear grapple by pressing L1, with the same also possible to transition from a rear grapple to a front grapple. To drag an opponent, this can be done by first locking up with them in a grapple and then moving the left analog stick to drag them around the ring. You can also perform a drag to a grounded opponent by holding R2, which will then see you take hold of your opponent and allow you to drag them around the ring using the left analog stick. When dragging your opponent over to the ropes, you can throw them to the outside by pressing L2. You can also use the same method to throw an opponent back into the ring by dragging them over to the apron and pressing L2. To perform an Irish whip, press the grapple button to grapple your opponent, then press circle to whip them into the ropes. You can also perform an Irish whip by approaching your opponent and pressing R2 along with the direction that you want them to go. Now that we know how to whip an opponent into the ropes, let's move on to rebound attacks. These can be performed by whipping your opponent into the ropes and then holding the grapple button or the high or low strike buttons when they rebound towards you. If you want to put on a show, you can also press L1 to evade your opponent with different characters featuring different animations. To perform a running strike, press the run button to run towards your opponent, then press the high or low strike buttons to perform a strike attack. To perform a running grapple, press the grapple button when running towards your opponent. You can also perform a strong running move by holding one of the strike or grapple buttons. With your opponent on the ground, players can perform strike attacks by pressing the high or low strike buttons. Grapple moves are also possible from a ground position, with players able to tap the grapple button to perform a grapple move. Depending on your location, different moves will be performed when standing next to a player's head, their arms or their legs. While your opponent is on the mat, you can also press R2 to turn them over, which in turn will allow you to perform a different set of moves to when they were facing up. To perform a corner move, you'll first need to set your opponent up in the corner position. To do this, you can either grapple with your opponent and press the Irish whip button to send them into the corner, or you can grapple your opponent and drag them to the corner, then press R2 to position them. From the corner position, players can use the strike buttons to perform strike attacks or the grapple button to perform a grapple move, with strong moves also available when holding the button. Players can also press L1 to switch to a rear-facing position, which will allow you to perform a different set of attacks. Other corner attacks include running moves, which can be performed to both front and rear-facing opponents. Now that we have the basics covered, let's try some high flying action, starting out with the top rope. To climb to the top rope, hold the left stick towards the corner and press L2 to climb to the top rope. You can also press the run button to perform a quick mount, though this is only available to certain characters. Once you reach the top rope, players can press the high, low or grapple buttons to perform a diving attack, with different attacks available depending on whether your opponent is in a standing position or whether they're grounded on the mat. To climb down from the top rope, you can press R1 to dismount. To perform a rope move, you'll first need to have your opponent resting on the ropes, which you can do by performing a grapple, then using the left analog stick to move them towards the ropes. With your opponent on the ropes, players can use the strike buttons to perform strike attacks or the grapple button to perform a grapple move. Players can also force their opponent to the ropes when using a strike attack, where you'll then be free to perform a running move to knock them off the apron. You can also transition from a regular rope position to a middle rope position when forcing your opponent over to the ropes and pressing L1. From this position, you'll also be able to perform a series of strike and grapple attacks as well as running moves. When striking your opponent, you may occasionally find that they fall through the ropes onto the apron, where it's also possible to perform a series of attacks. With an opponent on the apron, players can force them off using a series of strike attacks, both from a standing or a running position. You can also opt to grapple your opponent, which will allow you to perform a stronger move by pressing the strike or grapple buttons. Apron moves can also be performed when standing on the apron with your opponent in the ring, where you can use the strike buttons to throw kicks and punches, or use the grapple button to grab your opponent and perform a grapple move. If you're playing as a high flyer who features the springboard skill, you can also use a devastating springboard move by holding the analog stick towards your opponent and pressing square and X or triangle and circle, with different moves also available depending on whether your opponent is standing or grounded. As well as the ability to perform springboard moves from the apron to the ring, characters with a springboard ability can also perform springboard moves while in ring by pressing square and X or triangle and circle and moving the left analog stick towards the ropes. Springboard moves can be performed to opponents both in ring as well as on the outside, as using the springboard buttons while an opponent is at ringside will see you perform an outside dive. You can also perform a springboard move while moving towards the corner, with these moves also possible against opponents both in ring and on the outside, as well as on the apron. It's also possible to perform a springboard move from the apron itself while your opponent is at ringside. Taunts can be performed by moving the right analog stick up, down, left or right. After dealing damage to an opponent and gaining momentum, your spirit meter will enter a signature state, which will stay active while you're on the offensive. During this period, players can perform a signature move by approaching their opponent and pressing the D-pad. The direction that you press on the D-pad and the position that you need to be in for a signature will all depend on the character that you're using, as signature moves can be performed from a variety of different positions. To check the position that you need to be in, you can pause the game and select the Moves option to view a list of signatures and finishes. This screen will show you the position that you need to be in to perform the move, as well as the direction that you need to press. To perform a finishing move, you'll first need to enter a signature state. Once in a signature state, move the right analog stick to perform a taunt. Completing the taunt will see the spirit meter change to a special state, at which point you'll have a short amount of time to perform a finisher. Finishes are performed by approaching your opponent and moving the right analog stick up, down, left or right. Like signature moves, finishes come in a variety of positions, therefore it's always best to check the move list to see which position that you need to be in to perform your finisher. If the character that you're using has the gimmick infringement skill, then this will allow you to steal and perform your opponent's finishes, which you can do by pressing in the right thumbstick. With your opponent on the mat, players can attempt a pinfall by pressing L1. Pinfalls are always best attempted when an opponent's spirit meter is blue or when it shows danger, as this is an indication that they're ready to be pinned. While in a pinfall, you can also press R1 to cancel. Should you find yourself being pinned, you can attempt a kick out by pressing all 4 face buttons repeatedly. Submission moves work in the same way as pinfalls, with players required to quickly press all 4 face buttons to escape. Like pinfalls, you can also cancel a submission by pressing R1. Reversals in Fight Forever are split into 2 groups, strikes and grapples, with different reversal buttons for each. To reverse a strike, this can be done by pressing R1 just before the moment of impact. A grapple move can be reversed using L1, though players will need to successfully time the press when the grapple is initiated. Once in a lockup, players can also use the reversal buttons to time a reversal when a move is performed. If easy countering is turned on in the menus, players can also use the face buttons to counter moves. The easiest reversal method is to spam all 4 face buttons while in a lockup, or if easy countering is turned off, then keep pressing L1 and R1. A dodge move can be performed by quickly moving the analog stick twice in the same direction. Performing this action will see the player attempt to dodge an attack, with the dodge animation varying depending on the character used. Another way of avoiding an attack is to hold the guard buttons. Like reversals, these are split in two, with L1 used to block grapples and R1 used to block strikes. Holding R1 will see you enter a blocking state that will see you puff out your chest in a blocking motion, which will protect you from strike attacks, however it won't protect you from grapples. Holding L1 will see you enter the grapple guard state, which will allow you to counter grapples should your opponent attempt them, though it won't protect you from strikes. One additional move position that I wanted to include is the seated position, as some signature and finishing moves require an opponent to be in the seated position to be performed. To place an opponent in the seated position, the best way to do this is to lock up with a grapple, then hold the analog stick down and press the grapple button. This will perform a snapmare move, which will leave the opponent in a seated position. If you want to take things to the extreme, players can grab a weapon from under the ring by moving the left analog stick towards the apron and pressing R2. Doing this will pull out a weapon at random, with around 50 weapons available in total. Players can also pull a random weapon from the crowd by moving towards the guardrail and pressing R2. So that's the basics covered. Now you know everything that you need to know to get started in AEW Fight Forever. If there's anything that I've not covered in this tutorial that you're having problems with, let me know in the comments and I'll try to help you out where I can, but in the meantime, stay tuned to the channel for more tutorials on AEW Fight Forever. Until next time, thank you so much for watching, have yourself an awesome day, and I'll catch you later.